Well, hi guys, this is Dr. Scott, and today we're going to get in it with Chad Stewart. Now, here's the funniest thing with Chad. There's a woman named Terry that kind of, in essence, reps a little bit for some different people, and she had actually texted me Chad's information, and I was like, no, not really. And I was dumb about this, and my wife was looking through my text messages. She was like, what? Why were you a moron about Chad? He is perfect for your show. And I was like, really? And, because he actually talks about storytelling, he talks about a lot of information. He's done a whole bunch of different podcasting, and he's going to talk a little bit. We're going to get into some AI issues and storytelling. He and I had conversations about a lot of areas on the phone. I just think that you guys might find some really unique ideas out there that can give you some unique perspectives on circumstances. So how you doing, Chad?
I'm doing great. Doing great.
All right. So tell me a little bit about your background and what's been happening for you with that too.
Sure. And let me just do a quick overview, and then your audience kind of has the whole picture, and then we can pull a string on any of those areas. But originally from Newport Beach, California, back east, Wellesley, Massachusetts for 16 years. Did my undergraduate in British Literature, European History, which will explain a little bit about my book series. Then went on to postgraduate, graduate school, and then actually got into investment banking, worked for 3 Fortune 100 companies. And it was at the last one that I was just really sort of burned out. I was dying to do something creative, come back to the creative world, come back to the childlike splendor of life, right? And I was at this boring seminar in Providence, Rhode Island, and I started to drift and I started to doodle. And that's when I drew a circle, 3 lines, a basket, a boy and a girl, and I wrote The Boy and the Balloon, which you can see behind me. And I just, that doodle just transformed into this great idea of an adventure novel taking place in present day England, starting up at Yorkshire, Northern England. It's about Tom, 12-year-old orphan, and his best friend Sarah. They've been at this horrible place called Weatherly Orphanage for 6 years. This is the year they're going to escape. And I say that within the first couple of lines. So this isn't a David Copperfield story, about an orphanage. It's about getting out of the orphanage. And so that gauntlet has been thrown within the second page. And pretty quick on, they get together with the other orphans and plan this major, it's called The Great Escape. It's chapter 8. And eventually escape, commandeer a hot air balloon, and they're trying to get to London, but they're chased by the illustrious detective Gower Stone, who's renowned for capturing runaway orphans and lost children. And they go from Oxford to Windsor, London, and finally down to Canterbury. And so I sat down, took me 4 years, 2,500 hours to write book 1, Britfield and Lost Crown, 384 pages. And from concept and doodle to launching, it took over 10 years. 10 years of hard work, dedication, raising capital. We're talking millions of dollars, building the team. And officially, we did a soft launch in August 2019. And since then, it's become one of the most awarded books in children's fiction. It's a bestseller and is on parallel to outsell Harry Potter in the next 8 to 10 years, which is our goal.
No way.
And it's the complete opposite of Harry Potter. So it's really kind of C.S. Lewis's attack against Harry Potter. But it's real quick, what makes the book so fun and engaging, number 1, current time. Number 2, we don't use any heightened fiction, witchcraft, demigods, superheroes, none of those devices that's saturating the market. It's about family, friendship, loyalty, courage, and hope. And as children are reading it, as adults are reading it, they're learning about geography, history, art, architecture, and culture.
Is it set in what kind of time frame is it set in?
Current time, current day.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is so important too. It's not post-apocalyptic, with like Hunger Games. It's not in the past. It's right now. It's happening right now. All the locations are real. Everything. I do deep research, especially as being a historian with a history background and stuff. So it's fun and it's fast paced. It's there's a great quote that says it's a combination of C.S. Lewis and Dan Brown. Another one of my favorite comments is reminds me a lot of the James Bond series, but with a bigger cast and a greater purpose. And so it really is this fast paced, exciting adventure. We got this royal mystery, Britfield and Lost Crown, that's threaded through it. We launched book 1 in 2019. When we launched, I did a national school tour, and we talk a little bit about this. I drove 9,000 miles. I visited 23 states, presented to over 200 schools in front of more than 50,000 students. And I was in Oklahoma. I have fond memories of being in Oklahoma City. I was based there for about a week. Good old friend of mine, great guy, used to do retail sales. Took me out for a great steak dinner. We went to that, I guess it's like the famous steakhouse that's part of the cattle field there. You might probably know in Oklahoma City. So a lot of fun. But anyway, so it was incredible. And it was like, huge auditorium. It was 4th through 8th graders, anywhere from 200 to 400 students, private, public, Christian, Catholic, homeschool, charter, you name it. I saw it, and it was amazing. And if we have time, we can always talk about that. And I did it for a lot of reasons. One is I wanted to get a sense of what was happening in the United States. We have all this research and you see stuff in the news and alternative and all that, but I wanted boots on the ground. I wanted to be driving into towns and cities. I wanted to be going to the schools, talking to teachers, talking to librarians, finding out what was happening. And so it was profound and powerful. And then we launched book 2 in 2021. Takes place in France. So the series continues. It picks up 6 months later. So they're not separate episodes like the Hardy Boys, but it's kind of this continuation. It's like 6 months later. Okay. And it's kind of Tom's search to find his family, if his family's still alive, and Sarah, his best friend, who's along for the journey. And it's got this wonderful cast of characters: Detective Gowerstone, Professor Hainsworth. In book 2, we introduce Inspector Fontaine, this 30-something inspector that's trying to help Tom and Sarah. And so book 2 takes place in France, and that's 474 pages. And then book 3, we launched in October 2022, which is kind of right there. One of my favorite. I love the cover. And that's Britfield, The Return of the Prince. That's 575 pages, takes place in Italy. And the main characters are now 14. And then we just launched book 4, Britfield and the Eastern Empire, in January of this year. It's 437 pages, 11 different countries, and a huge cast of characters of about 14, because a lot of the characters are kind of growing and continuing on this extraordinary journey. And so we're excited.
Audiobook too? Are you doing any audiobook kind of stuff or not?
Book 1 was done by professional award-winning British voice talent, Ian Russell. And it's about 11 and a half hours. So the audio version for book 1 is available. It's fantastic.
Is it in Audible? Can you get it?
Yes.
Can you go to the site here and get it in Audible kind of thing? And
yes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
And just have had great feedback and stuff. We will do book 2, 3, and 4, and the rest in audio. Right now we're negotiating international global rights for the audio version. So we've held off because it's like, we're not going to spend the money and get it done if they're going to do it for us. And if they do it, they'll do it in different languages and things like that. So, and
that's really, I will tell you, I'm real picky about that. When I listen to, I'm an English major, that's my one of my undergrad degrees, and I'm real picky when I hear, voices and they mispronounce words. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're killing me. And you get actors who don't have a lot of education, and then they mispronounce words, and I'm dying. And that word keeps coming up. And I want
Stop it! It's like ringing bells or cymbals. So like we literally had this woman, Kelly, who was working with our team, and God bless her, because it's like what a brutal process. But she would. Ian would record like a certain section or a chapter, and then she would literally have to be listening to it like with earphones and going through the book and looking for any missed words or anything. Sometimes it's okay if you miss an and if it blends in, but it's like, and she's like on 17 minutes and 1 second, you miss, and it's like, I couldn't even imagine. So it's like,
See, that's as painful as
insurance seminars.
Yeah, it's as painful as rewriting, and I want to kind of ask you that.
Sure.
My very first book I ever wrote was, I'd written short stories all through undergrad, and I never thought about writing a book until 2006 when I wrote my first book called Violent Secret. We're talking a little bit about it, but my way of writing, is first, especially if I'm talking about fiction, is I first take my characters and I list the snot out of them. I'm going to get them down, all the way down from the primary, and I'm not talking about secondary characters, I mean, little bit characters where you might call them like handlebar mustache, man, because you're really not
Yeah.
the dude, right? I'm talking about the primary guys where you have really primary information, right?
Sure.
First and last name, you know everything about them. And there was an issue. This was in World War II. So I had my two primary characters with the Nazi, the SS man that was sitting at the train station, and they were processing them to dock out, but they didn't know all this, right? And so I was trying to I was stuck. I was stuck at a circumstance, and I was going, how would we, and they were going, listen, we're in the wrong area. We shouldn't be here. We weren't trying to do this. And I don't want to get too far off on there. And I was trying to say, how would I, reconcile this? And I was praying about it. I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And I came up with a solution. Now you can read the book if you guys want to find the solution. But what I see a lot of times is people violate the character.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you'll know what I mean by that,
Sure.
that issue, right? Would you talk a little bit about violation of character, that people do a lot of the time?
I love it too. We can kind of shift into story and structure now. And to me, like the type of writing that I'm doing, which I'd call it real fiction, authentic fiction. I mean, my books are as authentic as can be. I do deep research. I'm pulling up maps all the time, distances. So this will tie into the character thing, meaning it's like if they're here and an hour later they're 2,000 miles away or 100 miles away, it's like, how did they do that? So I mean, I'm like critical about like it doesn't get dark until 7. At night during this season and this. I mean, I'm looking up weather patterns and stuff, and because book 5 is Britfield and the Lost Treasure. I'm writing that right now. Starts in Siberia and then goes through China and Mongolia, and a lot of fun. And so I'm pulling up Mongolia and I'm looking at like what's they're marching through the forest, and so I'm looking up like what types of plants are there, what kinds of trees, what's the temperatures in mid-September. I mean, I do that kind of research. Now, right. I say all that to say I don't drown it out with details. This isn't a travel guide. This isn't a historic, but I want to be as authentic as possible. And I think that blends into your characters. And I loved when you were saying you do deep. I do a bio for every character, main character in my story. And again, it doesn't have to be pages, but you need to know if you don't know your character, then how's your audience going to know your character? And right. And what you're kind of talking, and when you were talking about that too, about making decisions they wouldn't make, it reminds me of like, when I was younger, I was into theater and I was into the improv. And it's like when you commit to a character and it's like, I'm no longer thinking Chad, what I would say or react in the situation. Right. I'm Charlie who looks at everything optimistically, or I'm Bob that just is angry about everything, and that emotion of anger drives the scene. And so when you're connected with your character, which is absolutely wonderful, you're not writing for your character's writing. It's when I'm doing dialogue, I'm like, who does that doesn't really sound like her. They wouldn't say something like that. It's like in book 1, Professor Hainsworth, he was fun. He's this old stuffy 70-something professor. He's been at Oxford for 40 years. He's been promised a sabbatical, vacations, but they just keep working him and they keep piling on like exams to be graded. And he's got like 3 doctorate degrees. And so he was very just matter of fact, it's almost when he's talking, he's giving a lecture, and so you're into that character. But I do love doing the deep dives, even for Tom or Sarah, Detective Gowerstone. I'm like, and some of the easy way to do it, even for your writers or listeners that want to be writers or want to write, just do kind of a mini bio, where they, and you have to get into deep details, but you should know their history. Yep. What are 3 strengths? What are 3 weaknesses? Yep. What are 3 things they're really good at? Great. That's going to be sort of your critical thing that drives them along. What are 3 weaknesses? Those could become strengths. That could be a character arc. And I'll use a great example. In book 1, Sarah's afraid of heights. That's one of these things that she has. And I justify it. When she was younger, playing in a tree, she fell down and broke her arm. So now height is pain, right? And so in order to escape they've got to get into a hot air balloon. So could you imagine anything worse? And it's so fun. It's like they shoot up in the air. They're like hundreds of miles up, 1,000 miles up. And Tom's like, oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. And look at the moon and the stars. And Sarah's like freaking out in the gut. But she has to overcome the fear of heights in order to progress forward. And so I've used a weakness, you could say, or a problem, and I've turned it into a character arc for her. Because like by the end, she's like, do you have a problem with heights? They're like on the 3rd story window, and she's like, are you kidding me? After the balloon. Tom's claustrophobic, and that'll tie in back to when he was a child of 2. He was kidnapped. He was wrapped in a blanket and taken from his parents. And so he doesn't even know why he's claustrophobic. But he has to, in order to escape Weatherly Orphanage, he has to climb through a very narrow tunnel. He has to overcome his fear and overcome that fear in order to progress forward or in order to succeed. And so, those are just ideas of small sort of character arcs. I think I've taught writing classes, and I'll use like The Karate Kid, the original. Do you remember that? Yeah. Classic, wonderful movie. Talk about character arc. The young kid that doesn't know how to fight, that's afraid, and he's got to be trained and learned. And it's like from here to here, at the end of the movie, he's taking on the bully, and he's doing well. And it's so it's great to kind of do that. 3 strengths, 3 weaknesses. One of the greatest things I heard from another author is, what's a secret they're keeping? And I love that. And I don't know. And so like I'll every book I do, I'll do a quick bio. Again, I return to it. Where are they at now? What do they want from this story? What do they want from this scene? What do they want over the next week? What are they driving for? What are their weaknesses? What are their strengths? And then I'll always put what's the secret they're keeping from the others? And most of the time I have no idea. And so I've got to dig deeper and figure out what it is. And from it, it's really great. I'm like, maybe I have 2 other characters, Oliver and Kate. And in book 4, I was doing this, and I'm like, what if Kate had a serious relationship before and she never told Oliver? And that's a good secret. And it comes out. And then suddenly it's like, he's like, what? Why didn't you tell me that? And, and it's the way it came out in book 4 is really cool too. But, so those are some things to think about. I hope that kind of answered it, but it's like being true.
It does, because one of the things that I find, it literally pisses me off when I see writers over the years, and I see this a bit, and I'm going to give you an example. As an eschatologist or a person who studied end time issues, okay, I see, people, because the most common thing is you'll have people who have studied end time issues. The number one thing they want to do is write a fiction. They want to write anything on fiction, and I'm like, well, great, but you guys suck at writing fiction. And they want to pull their information, which is relatively detailed, into fiction writing. And it was, I'm going to tell you, my co-author, Jeff Swanson, it was very painful. He's a wonderful man, and he knows this very clearly about it. But it was very painful to co-author with him because he wanted to pull over his information. He wanted to, tell the reader too much. And I'm like, no, there has to be mystery. You have to let the mystery show up.
You can't compromise the story and the flow of the story.
And there has to be mystery all the time. And he was like, no. And he was overthinking things a lot of times. And, and there has to be mystery in the mind of the person. There has to be interpretation at times too on things that don't matter, and that's fascinating too. You have to let some, inane details go as well. And there was all these kinds of funny things. Now, let me give you one example of a violation of character, which you just sort of said. There was this on a missionary. There was a missionary who was from Russia, the sweetest guy in the world. He comes to Dallas. He's talking to a church who was he calls them a bunch of sheep. I'm like, okay, got it. He comes talking to them, and he comes with fire and brimstone, just slashing and dashing every single person in the church. And then he walks out and talking to some of his supporters, and I'm going, okay, that isn't even like your character at all.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read his postscript, you hear the slash and dash kind of response, or however you might call it. That's probably not the right wording in there. And I'm like, dude, you completely violated your character. You pulled in, in essence, your Chad inside of the character.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
I'm like,
Exactly.
you can't do that. You have to. He would have said it a very different way, even if he was maybe a little bit mad. He would never say it. And for instance, my wife would say it completely different if she was mad than Scott would say it, kind of thing too. And I think that's something that we have never really done if you're a very new author in many ways too.
Yeah, what you're saying in some ways too is they're trying. The author's mind or the writer's mind had this scene, and he wanted to get it out there, whether that's a grandiose scene or an agenda or whatever it is, and he was forcing it, but it wasn't natural. That's what it sounds like. And also with like descriptions, I love what you're saying, because I had to remind myself with writing book one, because here's a history major. I've lived in Britain off and on for 2 years. So I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like they're flying over the Cotswolds, and that's where Shakespeare's house is. And suddenly I have this paragraph about Shakespeare, and then I'm coming through my edit, and I'm like, it's like a speed bump. I'm like, it has absolutely nothing to do with the story. Correct. And I'm shrinking it and shrinking it and shrinking it down. And I'm like, I had to remind myself, this isn't a history book. And this isn't a travel book. And so it is as a fiction writer, it's a very delicate art with details. And I wanted to compliment you too on what you said about, you don't need to drown it out with details. Let the imagination run wild. I can describe a castle, in the distance was this 6-story high gray stone castle with turrets. Boom. Leave it. I don't need to sit there. I don't need to sit there and say, as moss was climbing up the sides and the ivy was dripping in the dew of the morning with sun. I mean, like, what does that have to, let the kids frame it. To give you an example, like in Britfield Lost Crown, I'll describe the balloon, the height of it, the ropes, the basket. I never described the color of the balloon. And I did that very specifically because I wanted every child to fill it in. Right. And that's the idea of sort of creative writing, where I'm relying on you, the readers, I'll give you the framework. I'm going to let you fill it in, and I'll let you enjoy the experience.
It's not germane to that detail, and it's okay if the balloon is a maroon versus a blue for any other one. It is not going to. It's okay if you want to have kids around a table arguing why it might be a different color. It's totally fine.
Yeah, and the story isn't about the balloon, right? So I don't need to spend 4 pages or 4 paragraphs describing the balloons and the roping and how it's knotted and how thick the cables. I mean, it's just like, I don't need to drown it out with details. I frame it and I move on. Just to give you an idea, like in my last edit, and it's 10 to 20% writing, and it's 80 to 90% rewriting and editing, and that's the truth of the matter. And get over it. You know what I mean? It's like the better you get. For every single published page, professionally published page to write a book, it'll take you between 3 and 5 hours. Fact. So if you're going to do a 100-page book, it's going to take you anywhere from 300 to 500 hours. There's no way of getting around to that unless you're a hack, unless you want mediocrity. But that kind of excellence, takes time. My last edit, when I'm coming through my story, and I'm on paper edits now. I've now left the computer, because that's a whole nother world. We could talk about that. So you could write the greatest page on your laptop, perfect, and then print it out in a piece of paper and read it, and it will blow your mind. You'll find misspellings. You'll find words repeated.
Good point.
And so my last edit, it's already as tight as it can be. My goal, my last edit, is to get rid of 1 sentence per page. What can I absolutely get rid of? What doesn't need to be there? What's redundant? Can I take 2 sentences and combine them into one? Because it's all about flow and story. It's entering late, leaving early, starting on the action, ending on the action, moving the story. And this is true for nonfiction too. And the best nonfiction books I've ever written are by authors that also write fiction, because guess what? They know storytelling. And as an example, I mean, Beethoven's one of my favorite composers of all time. I read 2 biographies, one by a German PhD, and it was the driest thing I've ever read, and another by, a wonderful writer. Because, I mean, how do you make Beethoven boring? How's Beethoven? I mean, like the passionate, romantic extraordinaire. And one of my favorite books was The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes, Pulitzer Prize winning 1995. And you look at half of the books he writes are fiction. And so he drives an 800 to 900 page book that, quite frankly, could be real boring. I mean, the atomic bomb is interesting on one sense, but he gets into the science and all the different, decades and this and that and the Manhattan Project. But I mean, it was so well written. And it's because he's got the fiction background, because he knows how to tell a story. How many documentaries have you seen? And someone has in their mind that a documentary film it breaks all the laws of storytelling. We're just going to roll the camera and do an interview here, and then we're going to cut over here. And it's like the dumbest, boringest thing. That's not it. It's a story. A documentary should still be an action story, a movement story, a 3-act structure. Start on the action, end on the action, drive it. And most people don't get that. But I'll stop there.
No, and by the way, you just flipped into our next kind of topic that I really want to deal with, because, and we sort of talked about this a little bit, because we were talking about on the phone, we were talking about stories that excite us a little bit, and how Hollywood and other areas are so messed up in this. So,
sure.
And I want to just kind of throw this in here, because we have this really ugly circumstances of when AI is infecting storytelling. For instance, my son, we'll go over and we'll have penny ante poker on like once a month, I think it is. And he plays this music. Now, I'm a musician, I'm a singer. I nearly have perfect pitch. I can't handle it when he plays his music, because and he knows that. I don't whatever.
He's trying to throw your game.
Like, it totally messes me up, right?
Yeah.
Every once in a while. But I have to like ignore it as much as I can. And yet, because I'm listening to that stuff, right? But one of the things that happens, is that there's AI music, there's AI, words that are coming out that are happening, but there's AI storytelling and AI, media, and there's so much. So can you talk a little bit about this and what it's doing and infecting in storytelling as well as movies?
Yeah, I think it's to me, it's a very dangerous thing. I'm not an AI proponent. I think people that are hooking their wagon to it with excitement are foolish, and kind of leading themselves into their own death spiral. On the other side of it, I mean, it's not new. AI's been around for decades. It's just another form of technology. And let me ask your audience this question: who programs the AI? We do. Humans do. But it is a push towards a certain group of people that you probably have mentioned on your show before, the usual suspects that are trying to drive everything into technology. And I was doing an interview this morning, and there's a famous quote that the Terminator isn't a movie, it's a documentary, right? Oh. That is their goal,
Dude.
Yeah. That's their goal, though. That's what they want, because they hate God. And to them, God is imperfect, and God has made a mistake, and the humans are just we're going to improve it, and they're not, and they never are. And God is amazing, and the human body is the most extraordinary thing in the world. The human mind is extraordinary. Technology will never, ever even come close to beating that. But again, too, it's balance. And I've used the example. I was looking for my cell phone, but it's just like like the cell phone. It's like it can be a very dangerous tool, especially with children. You know what I mean? And spending too much time on it and carrying around with them all the time. And it's like, it's kind of sad too. You walk into a coffee place and you'll see everybody like this, and I'm like, what are you, all doctors waiting for results from the heart transplant? I mean, what is so freaking important? I always, if I take my phone with me, but I'll leave it in the car. I don't need to take it in the market with me, or I don't need to take it to an appointment. But on the other side, cell phone's fantastic. You know what I mean? I got emails, I can text, I've got a phone. I was like watching some old movie. It's like 30 years ago. It's like with Mark Harmon and Sean Connery, and at the Presidio or something. And it's like he's a detective and he's driving in San Francisco. He has to stop and get out of his car and make a phone call. I'm like, what is that thing? So I mean, there's parts of it that's incredible. I mean, there's no denying that. The laptop. We're doing an interview right now. I didn't need to drive out to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and sit in your studio. I mean, boom. I mean, it's fantastic. So it's just balance. You know what I mean? I mean, there's good and bad parts of it. The internet was created to destroy us. It's enlightened us and has set us free in many ways. And it's like the alternative media is the main media. They're the real media now. Mainstream media is dead. They're over. They overplayed their hand, and that was possible because of the internet, podcasts. You got some shows out there for people that started up 3-5 years ago, and they got 1 million plus worldwide viewers. 3-5 million. Been on a lot of those shows. It's incredible. So there's aspects of technology that are good, and there's aspects of technology that are bad. But I think on the whole, I think AI is a joke. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's stupid. It's not creative. It never will be creative. Now it can plagiarize and pull from other. It can write something, and it's not writing it itself. It's pulling from other writers. It can create artwork, but it's pulling from other artists. And so, the lie is, and it's all about the lies, the father of lies, right? It's always a lie. Oh my gosh, the things it's going to do, the things it can do, the things it's going to create. It's always a better thing, isn't it? The improved this, the improved that. And we even touch on this in our books, just as a footnote in the Britfield series. We thread a lot of these real world issues, through here. We talk about, in book 4, we're talking about the dangers of AI, how it's manipulating the stock market to crash it and wipe out trillions of dollars. When I was writing that, the stock market had just crashed, So book 3, book 2, Britfield and the Rise of the Lion, takes place in France. We talk about transhumanism and splicing human and animal DNA. They've been doing that for decades. We touch on it. We don't go dark, we don't go deep, but these are real things and real issues, and it works within this Britfield framework and time frame. But that's their goal. It's to mix man and machine. And it proved us and it proved human body, and it's all going to end in complete and total disaster for them. I'll stop.
Sure, it is. Well, I'm going to throw you, because we're gonna hit this one here, and I want to throw you some examples here, and we're going to just talk a little bit about this, because this is actually, these are pulled directly from my last book. And I haven't even released this. It's called On the Tribulation. So I knew that, I had finished a book. It's in background here. It's, gosh, I looked at it. Revelations of the Red Pill. So it's not on Revelation, the book of Revelation. It's called Revelations of the Red Pill. So it's a little different conversation. And I'm asking my wife, like, what should I talk on? And this new book is a hard one, because it's going to be a hard cover, and it's got a lot of my PowerPoints on there. So it's I think it's like a 7 by 11. It's a really odd shape. So and I can't make it as an Audible book, and it's not going to be like Kindle. So it's got to be a unique shaping, and so it's a pain in the butt to try to build.
Yeah, that's all I can think about right now.
And so like we are fighting. Like,
good luck getting that printed. Yes.
Yeah,
cheaply.
Yeah, it's like trying to figure, and it's not going to be cheap either. It's gonna be a $30 book at least, or whatever, that too. So I'm going to throw you some different things. I'm just going to throw you some pictures. Now, I always buy pictures when I do these.
Sure.
So these are real pictures. So here's a real picture from World War II. This is the Japanese, and these are so this is a real picture. So this is, and this elicits an actual response.
Sure.
That kind of thing too. Okay.
It's horrifying.
So,
yeah.
You get it. This would probably be about 43 or 44. Okay. All right. Second one. Now, I use this as an example. Let me pull off something here. Hold on one second. So very, very common viewpoint, an untheological viewpoint, is Satan versus Jesus. So this is a very common idea that Jesus is arm wrestling Satan. And so I pulled this, and so I was trying to get this, and if you notice, it's grok. Okay, so I was trying to do this because commonly people want to say this is what would happen if we're saying good versus evil, and it is a doctrinal idea. Doctrines are something that happen from what man views as ideas versus the concept of what theology says or the word says, and yet it equates what Satan is versus what Jesus does, but that's not what the word says. The word actually intimates that Jesus will send Michael the archangel out, and he will actually deal with the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan, and puts them in the abyss. And I was trying to, and in my book, I'm kind of dealing with this, but yet this elicits an idea, that kind of thing too, messes your brain up, obviously.
Sure.
And see, and we go down a path. Okay, here's another kind of point here. This is a real picture.
Oof. Awful.
So you see this kind of thing, and in this particular conversation, she goes, "I can't get a job."
I wonder why.
Yeah, you're going, okay, right? Another, I mean, we could write on this a lot. This one actually purchased as well. This is from a zombie walk in Denver area.
Ugh.
So actually, if you dress up as with this kind of thing, you get to ride free on many of the zombie walks. So this is kind of the thing that happens during the Halloween timeframe. And actually, many times what they've done is this created so much problem, it creates violence in many of these areas. So they've stopped zombie walks with that kind of thing too. It's funny.
Probably not a good thing to have. Yeah.
They're like, okay. So I'm just trying to tell you how real world kind of issues, right? With that kind of thing too. And then we're going to show you a last little picture. This one was very hard to build. Obviously, this is AI. So I was doing seven, the seven angels. This is Revelation, want to say chapter 7. And I was having, doing the 7 trumpets, right? And I was having a lot of troubles getting the faces right.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of difficulties. It was really a struggle because they were not correct. I kept doing, do this right, do this better. And the angel.
How long did it take you from start to finish to produce what you're showing me right now, just out of curiosity?
It probably was about a 2-hour process of recreating. Sure. And again, AI can be very helpful,
Sure.
And again, this is a helpful time frame, a helpful circumstance, and even the Satan one, this was probably a fast one. This probably was only like 15 minutes.
Nice.
With that one kind of thing. I was just trying to re-explain that one. But this one here, this one took me like 2 hours. But if you notice, they'll have, real problems with mouths on the side. And if you notice, one of the things that will happen is they'll mess up fingers.
Fingers are tough, right? They've always been if you ever took an art class, right? Remember the fingers? Those are the hardest for whatever reason. They're the hardest thing to get.
Right. And they're still screwing up fingers over here. They're separating fingers in a really weird way. And they will get things messed up. And yet, when you look at this kind of stuff, and this is one of the things, this is why I go backward here, whereas, real world, now they're starting to get a lot better. And you go, well, is that AI? No, that's not AI. I can promise you that one's not AI. And I know for a fact, this isn't AI, kind of thing.
Sure.
So, whereas I know for a fact also this is not AI kind of thing too.
Sure.
From this is way before AI, when I actually got this and purchased that. So what I'm trying to share with you guys too is that the conversation we were saying, early on here is that, and Chad actually brought this up. And so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take over a little bit, but I wanted to say this. Chad brought this up, and then I'm going to let you kind of drive a little bit more, is who writes the AI?
Yeah.
and we're talking about relatively imperfect, people, and we're seeing more and more of imperfect nature with that too. And so, talk on that a little bit more, and that imperfect nature with that.
Yeah, too. And as you're discussing it, it's just like, God has given us, a soul, and period. And that's something that can never be duplicated without the God factor. And from that soul, we sort of have a conscience, and it is a God factor. And it's not to say that you have to be saved to not care about your kids, you know what I mean, or run to protect someone that's just about to be hit. And those are emotions. Those emotions based in the soul. AI will never have that. So it in the critical places, when it's writing something or duplicating something as a computer, as a technology, without any human help, it'll fail because it doesn't have the finite definition of knowing right from wrong, black and white, and that sort of compassion, and empathy, and so that would be kind of one of my aspects of an argument towards it, and why it'll fail. As you said, it can do some things really good, and I'm all for that. I mean, I like that. There's a show that was on Josh, and it's the Discovery Channel, and it goes around the world. It's really fun. I mean, it's like all these treasure hunts and all this other stuff, and they were mapping out, trying to find in this ocean something, and like they're putting in all the data, and because of AI or advanced technology, we can call it, it's like what would take weeks, took hours. You know what I mean? And I always remember that. And I thought, there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, there it is. And I'm like, that's fantastic. I mean, from the calculator, do I need to sit there and say what's 17.6 times, boom, boom,
Yeah,
boom,
I mean, like
done.
right now, I'm calculating something, with AI, with Grok AI and some other issues, like some Trump tariffs and IRS issues. Hey, listen, I'm going to use AI to use calculators.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that, because they're pulling on real data to pull in some calculations along with some, hey man, there's nothing wrong with some of that stuff. But you also have to go step back from those kinds of areas, right?
Sure.
And I'm sure you utilize those kinds of things, because if you're talking about Siberia, I mean, it's a perfect example. If you're saying Siberia, you're also saying, you're way north of the equator. You're also looking at, sunlight,
Mhm.
and the daylight's going to be, a much, the daylight's up pretty quickly, so your day's a lot longer overall, and so you've got to also cover that issue, and just all those kinds of crazy things that you have to look at. So those are helpful to have
Sure.
in the background, but you have to have the creative mind, and we are missing that issue.
Yeah, we are, as a nation, we are in a creativity crisis. We have been for over 30 years, and it's really by design. They're getting creativity out of the classroom, and what we're trying to do with the Britfield series is bring creativity back into the classroom. So while we're in a creativity crisis, and it's in specifically 10 separate areas at a 45-degree angle, every single year it's going down. Every single year, creativity is the number one most important skill set in the world. Fact. That's done by research. It's not technology. It's like, what kind of degree should I get? Should I be an engineer? Well, if you want your job offshored, sure, to a third world country, or just replaced by technology, which is going to happen. And I've got a lot of these numbers out there. Something like 80% of all accounting jobs will be obsolete in 5 to 10 years. 40% of all medical jobs will be obsolete in the next 5 to 7 years. And it just goes all the way down the list in all these different areas. And you remember how hard they push? Don't go into art. You're not going to be an artist. Don't go into music. You're not going to be a musician. Terrible advice. And we are now in an art, what would be considered a creativity renaissance, which is exciting. And it's the rise of creativity, because they've been suppressing it and suppressing it and suppressing it for decades. And now it's coming back full throttle. And it's creative applicants, and I have all the stats. I have a 120-page, pitch deck just on creativity, and it's my thesis of my doctorate program. So I know a lot about it. But creative candidates at some of the top technology companies, some of the top companies in general, creative applicants are preferred 10 to 1. So if you have creativity in your background, You could have a MBA from Stanford and worked at McKinsey, but if they find creativity in your background, you have a 5 to 1 to 10 to 1 better chance of getting hired to that job.
Oh,
If you have real quick, if you have music in your background, this is really interesting, and you want to work for Google or Facebook, why you would, I don't know, and they see that you have music in your background. It says, I played the trumpet for 5 years, read music. You have a 5 to 1, 10 to 1 better chance of getting that job, because they know people that have experience with music, reading and playing are better managers, are better under crisis, are better brainstormers, are creative thinkers, and can transition quickly or quicker than most others when things shift and move, which they're happening all the time now. I mean, we're in this incredible time frame. You know what I mean? Like what's new today was old in Taiwan last week. Do you know what I mean? I mean, things are moving so quickly and so fast. So you need creativity, as a basis, as a foundation to think, to outthink, to adapt, to be creative, to be critical thinkers. And all this is the stuff that they've been suffocating and destroying in schools, starting as low as kindergarten and first grade. And kids are basically done by 6th grade as creativity has been sucked, as the marrow of creativity has been sucked out of them. And it's sad. And there's a test done by George Land years ago. You might be familiar with it. He created it for NASA. That's a whole nother story.
Oh, yes.
And we won't go down that road. But anyway, very successful creativity test. They had analytical tests, mathematical tests, but they needed a creativity test to know that people could, adapt and think, and what happens if this happens. And so he took that same test into the educational system because he was curious. And he started to test 5-year-olds. And across the board, 98 out of 100 5-year-olds tested off the charts, little geniuses, little creative geniuses. And I can give you an example if we have time. And then he tested that same group at 10, and it went from 98% to 30%. And then he tested them again at 15, and it dropped down to 12%.
Right.
And so you had that mass, and basically at schools we're teaching creativity out of children. You ask why? A plethora of reasons, but the first and foremost is that, they're not individual thinkers. They don't want individual thinkers. They don't want creative thinkers. They want everyone to do it as they're told. And the entire educational system, which was founded in the 19th century on an industrial model, has not changed. And it was the idea that they were training people to go into the factory, and that hasn't changed. But go ahead.
No, it's one of the reasons why we homeschooled all the way through.
Yeah.
And there was a time where my son was in our office, in the back office, and through his, he was probably 9 years old. And my wife is in the back office. It was a really tough time for us. I mean, I was 90% net debt to income in the business. And and he was spending time, and he was on this computer. And at first I was really bummed about it. And I thought he was playing games. And then I found out he wasn't playing games. He was reverse engineering that computer. Sweet. He was reverse. It wasn't like, he wasn't getting on getting on porn sites. What he was doing is reverse engineering, like how to code. I mean, he was doing crazy things, and then he was pulling apart the computer. We'd get old computers back there, he's ripping them apart, and just actually had engineering skills before engineering skills were even loading in. And so that kind of creativity was fascinating. And at first when we were talking chess, I mean, I was ripping them apart, and I don't even know, a year later, I'm like, dude, I ain't playing you. Love it. I can't do this. I'm done.
I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out. Tap out. And so I think that's the kind of stuff, that we did. And, when he was in grad school, he was in business, in his master's in the MBA. And I'm like, just eyes wide open. I'm just like, no idea what you're talking about, because the Excel spreadsheets. Now, obviously, I have a way more understanding on monetary issues and global monetary policies that he doesn't know, and management issues and other things, with wisdom that he doesn't have as a 20-year-old. But what occurs is that when you apply some of those levels in there, there's fascinating parts of creativity, because I'm a musician on top of it, and so one of the things that fascinating to what you said is, left brain thinkers have been developed over most of the time frame in the school systems, right? And they've killed off the right brain thinkers with that.
Sure.
The corpus callosum is the connector between the two hemispheres. Well, the fascinating part that most people don't understand is that if you actually have a piece of music in front of you, and you're singing, there are 12 cranial nerves. You're actually, if you sing a song and you're able to read that song, you're actually innervating 9 of the 12 cranial nerves. So most people don't realize, if you're singing that song, you're actually innervating 9 of the 12 cranial nerves, which you can't actually do in any other time frames. And your corpus callosum is double the size of any other person. If you're
thicker in women, actually, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. And so, that's why they love that creative thinker in that kind of way, especially the musician, because they're like, whoa, that kind of person has abilities. So
yeah, I mean, it's amazing too. You're like, what does music have to do with consulting or building, and I would argue everything. It doesn't have to be all one thing too. I mean, you can go into music and not necessarily want to be a famous musician, but you can pursue it and enjoy it. Do a BA in music and a master's in finance or whatever. But you have that creative background. It's always balanced too. It's never one thing. That what's happened is that they've killed creativity. They're even taking play out of recess now. It's like, dear goodness gracious, right? I mean, it's like ridiculous. And I love the homeschool movement. I'm a huge fan of it. The most well-rounded, well-educated children that I have met, and I've met, let's say, 50 to 100,000 since we've launched Britfield, is a homeschool kid. And if you tell me your kid is homeschooled, I get all excited. Like I'm like, oh, cool, I'm gonna have a real conversation. And they'll come in and they're very grounded and very polite, and they listen and they ask great questions, and they're truthfully inquisitive. They're usually 1 to 2 grades ahead of everyone else. They're well-read, well-rounded, right? And everything the opposite of the traditional.
Yeah, when you ask them, like, what grade are you in, they're like,
yeah, define that. What's your parameters? Yeah, and I'll never forget this. I got a lot of great stories, but one was I was at this fundraiser years ago, and we were talking about education and stuff, and it was a woman, and she lived in a nice area, successful woman, and she had a child that was he had the flu, or not the flu, but he was ill, not terminally, but he was ill, and he's just an average student. He wasn't extremely bright, but he had to be pulled from school for the year. He just couldn't be in the school, and so they got all the homework, everything that he needed to do for that entire year, and she said he was done within 4 to 6 weeks.
Right. Right.
And I remember, and she wasn't trying to sell me on anything. I didn't like plant seeds. I wasn't even talking about it. And she was just saying matter of factly. And that's the system. You know what I mean? 10-year-olds weren't designed to sit in an institution for 40 hours a week. Who came up with that absolute nonsense? And their only qualification to be in this classroom is that they're 12 years old.
Right.
And you wonder why they're antsy at 10 years old to be sitting in a desk staring at a wall all day. Are you freaking out of your bloody mind? You know what I mean? There's nothing natural about any of it. That's the factory model. But go ahead.
No, it's exactly right. And I just think, guys, what I as we're kind of wrapping up here with that too, I think what we're trying to say is that I think the world is prepping you with the AI kind of thing, and this is what you're seeing. They kind of load into your head this kind of thing, and what that does is it gives you a doctrine. Whether or not, I'm not just talking about the doctrine about Jesus versus Satan, but I'm telling you is that they have a doctrine, and you can break the doctrine, whatever that might be, whether it's any kind of AI doctrine. Break the doctrine, because their doctrine is trying to depress you in every way, shape, and form. And I really recommend that you pick up, the Britfield series. By the way, one of the things I have determined over the years is that I always have an audiobook on the way to work.
I love it.
I mean, and I have my Audible series going on every day. I am always on the way to work. There is an Audible series going on. Now, in between, if I have finished mine, I have my YouTube music, which with worship or praise. It's one of the two.
Nice.
But I have an Audible book going on, and I'm never without an Audible, a book. So that means I'm going through a book every single month on top of my other readings.
Great.
So that's really important, and I've pushed my staff in that kind of way. So why can't you guys add that in here? Why can't you add in a Britfield book? So I'm giving you the opportunity to jump into Britfield.
Love it.
And jump in there and get the first one of the series. You can go onto a site, jump in there and pick up the first book. And do you have the first book, but you have the other ones kind of coming up here real soon?
Yeah, we will. The first book is on audio, and then obviously we've got the 4 books launched now: hardcover, softcover, and quite frankly, 96% of the audience are book readers, not audio listeners. But I love the audio myself, and have a history of doing novels through that. It's a great way to do it.
And frankly, I'm old enough. I'm a physical book. I just do not get into like the Kindle version. But I know you have Kindles, so I mean you have Kindle versions.
We have ebook, yeah, and that's about 8% of the market. It's flatline. It's not going to go up any higher. They thought it would go to 30%, but they were dreaming. Kids, and I'll be honest, kids love the physical book, and I know that because I toured the United States and asked them. You know what I mean? But they love holding it, they love reading it, they love touching it, and so yeah.
Well, and kids are going to be very different, than if you're talking about, I don't know, and pick the the Dean Koontz kind of writer who's probably talking to the airport reader, kind of thing, which is going to be very Kindle in nature with that too.
Can be, yeah.
But I think you're going to see much more of the paper stuff. And I'm going to tell you, as we start seeing this nation flipping over and getting rid of this kind of mentality, you're going to see a lot more paper going. Then you're going to see that digital.
It's increasing right now by 5 to 7% every year. Now the paper market and bookstores, which was on the decline, it was like 3,000 in the United States. It was down to about 1,600. It's now growing at 5 to 7% every year. So the bookstores are coming back. The books are coming back. And there's always this hard push, right, of, we'll call it the enemy or the usual suspects, and get everything online. I mean, you had libraries, and it's like, let's get everything digitalized, and we don't need the printed copy anymore. And it's like, well, why would they push for that? Well, guess what? If you get the Bible in a digital form, what can they do with it? They can change it. They can remove a word or a sentence, right? But when you physically have it, you can read it and hold it. And there's something about physically reading it from the paper, not the backlit blue screen of the Kindle or of the computer. So it's good to have the books. Yeah.
And I totally get it. I totally get it in that way. And I think that's there is a frankly, there's other standards too. Physically writing something down actually helps your memory patterns too. So there's actually other points in there as well too.
It does.
I think it's a powerful point here too. So I think if you're thinking about, and by the way, everyone who's thinking about writing, I think you can actually learn, some levels of this about thinking about writing, because there's a ton of people who talk about writing and they haven't really put it forward with that too. So you can actually learn a lot about that as well too. So thanks so much for coming on, and I really appreciate you do.
Well, great show, and thank you to your audience. And again, too, check us out at britfield.com. If you purchase books through our website, I'm still signing them. You'll actually get signed books, and I'm doing that for probably 2 more weeks. But we're in pre-production of the first of 7 major motion pictures right now. We're going to be filming in England next year. I'm getting too busy. I can't do anymore, but it's kind of cool. I myself, as an author, love to have the signed copies, and I'm not going to be doing that much more. They're great gifts. They're great holiday gifts. So now's the time.
Well, that's cool. Well, I appreciate it much, guys. So if you're looking into that, it's definitely in that time season to go ahead and pick up one. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.